So welcome everybody. Lovely to see you all. Here we are again. Are we here again? Are we here? Here we are. Someone asked me today online, do I understand what I'm talking about? And I think those of you who have listened to me enough know that I don't understand what I'm talking about. But that isn't to say that there isn't understanding. It's just that understanding is irrelevant. So I quite often speak about the peace that passes all understanding. And the only reason I do that is because it resonates from my childhood and hearing that phrase and thinking, Jesus had something that sounds pretty good. The peace that passes all understanding. And so it might sound as though I have that. I have the peace that passes all understanding, but that's not what the peace that passes all understanding means. It means it's a peace that is regardless of understanding, in spite of understanding, despite all understanding. So there can be understanding or not. It's irrelevant. Understanding is only relevant to understanding. Whereas this is laughing at your attempts to understand. This is laughing's too much. It's completely ambivalent, utterly disregarding, doesn't recognize you or your understanding. It can hit really hard. What I was always afraid of my irrelevance. I was always attempting to be significant, significant to other human beings, significant to myself, significant to the world, the universe, to God, to anything else. My significance was always in relation to others, even if those others were myself. My own self-esteem, my own self-importance, my own self-significance. So what may seem to die is this relationship that I have with myself. And I have no doubt that for self, the most significant relationship it has is with itself. How I feel about myself. This mythical self-esteem. And self doesn't mind how it feels about itself as long as it does. So negative feelings about myself are just as self-reaffirming. My lack of worth, my poor worth, my not good enough is just as effective, if not more effective, in making me feel real. You could say in keeping me alive, in making me existent. And so it can sound as though these non-duality talks that I seem to give, or anyone else, are pointing out that you could fall away. There could be a falling away of self. Now, in the story, that's the only way we can really speak about it. But there can be no falling away of something that isn't. So there really isn't anything to fall away. There is only falling away. This is always falling away. So in that sense, there's no finding. This isn't a landing. This isn't coming to a conclusion. This is completely open. Totally open. In a devastating way where there is nowhere to stand. And self was always looking for the ground to stand on. Whereas this has no ground. The only ground is groundless. So I can't emphasize enough, this is not what you're looking for. This is not what you've been looking for. You've always been looking for something else. And there simply isn't something else. This is all somethings and nothing equally. So if you've been searching for nothing, you won't find nothing. There's nothing to be found. And if you're searching for something else, then of course, that's always somewhere else. And there isn't somewhere else. The obviousness is outrageous. It is a joke. All my efforts to become all your efforts to become utterly futile, wonderfully, beautifully futile, along with everyone else's. There is no becoming. This doesn't become. This simply is. Life is and isn't. And if your quest is still to know the difference between real and unreal, what is and what isn't, if I could, I would give you some guidance about how you could call off the search. But you are the seeking. You are the search. That's what self is. Self is the, this can't be it. And of course, this can't be it is equally it as this is it. There's really, it doesn't. This is it does not solve it. There isn't anything to be solved. So even though this might still sound as though it's a solution, there can be, this is insoluble. There is no solution when all questions and all answers are ever present. All questions are just as much life as any answers. But if you've asked a lot of questions, like I did, I asked a lot of questions, seemingly inexhaustibly asking questions, you will know already, if you've done that for what seems like a lifetime, then every time you've got an answer, it's satisfied for such a tiny momentary amount of time. Just the satisfaction in an answer could only lead to another question. I mean, that's the beauty of science. Science asks questions, and an answer just creates a new question. So when I say unanswerable, I mean that literally. So it might feel like giving up, but trying to give up, that wouldn't be giving up. It can be really simply clear that efforts to surrender, effort to be accepting and not ask any more questions takes just as much effort as asking the questions, if not more. So this isn't a denial of anything. And it can sound, because I talk about not knowing and unknowing, maybe I might say that, sounds as though not knowing is the truth. Of course, there's no more truth in not knowing than there is in knowing. It isn't that one is better than the other. It's that they're both equally empty. Whereas knowledge seems to suggest a fullness of knowing, something solid, whereas not knowing is empty. But really, who knows the difference between knowing and not knowing? Do you know? I don't. It's wonderfully liberating when you hear someone say what they know. You don't have to tell them this, but when it's really obvious that what they know is what they think they know and nothing more. That's beautiful. And then there's no there's no desire to correct them. The desire to correct anyone's knowledge only comes from your desire to know, to be right. And there is no one has got this right. No one could get it wrong. And then every human being's relative knowledge is just seen for what it is. And that can feel like love. All that beautiful, empty knowledge. So it's not even that there's no one who's ever worked this out. It's that there's nothing to work out. And there's just some human beings who said they have worked it out. Well, well, thanks for coming, everybody. If you'd like to share anything or you want to ask a question, then feel free to do that. Cold coffee. I just get a drink.
Dario has his hand up.
Hi, Dario.
Hi, Tim.
Hi there.
Hi. Well, my question they keep falling away, and I don't remember what I wanted to ask. But I remember that I was happy to be here, and it was lovely to just show up.
Oh, thank you. Well, if you think of anything, just, yeah, don't.
And maybe something will come up and stay for long enough for me to get it over.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar to me. I had a really good question. I haven't got a fucking clue what it is now. That's very familiar, though. That just shows how important the questions are, Dario.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, thanks, Daria. Pleased to have you here as well. Oh, lovely to see so many of you here. So it's great.
Go ahead, Michael.
Michael, hello.
Hello. If there is no self,
Mm-hmm.
in your opinion, who or what is aware of it?
Mm. Who's aware of no self?
Who's aware of the self if it doesn't exist?
It's a good question, Michael. I mean, it really is. This is a very simple answer. I don't doubt that no one knows. I mean, I just think it's natural. It's natural that when there is, so the sense of self is the sense of knowing. And it's based on, I know myself. It's the core of this sense of kind of certainty in knowing is that I know who I am. If I know who I am, then based on that, pretty concrete certainty, which for most souls, it seems to be, most human beings with this sense of self is this core of, I know who I am. So if I know who I am, I know who you are. And that certainty, that it comes from this sense of who I am. Now, if that just doesn't appear, there's no knowing of, I can't emphasize this enough, there's no knowing of no self. When I talk about not knowing, I think it is the not knowing of, if I don't know me, if I have no idea, I've just there's nothing, there's no sense of who I am. There are stories about Tim that I can tell, but they don't even seem like my stories. They're stories. And they don't seem any different to your stories, Michael. Then, but that doesn't answer your question. The answer to your question is, I don't know.
Oh.
I know, it's disappointing, isn't it?
It was really a stupid question.
The thing is, I mean, I will say there is something else about that. When you say, who is it that's aware that they aware of self or not aware? So you would have to, who is it that's aware of self or aware of no self? I would say there's neither anyway. So, but there is an illusion of being aware of self. That's, so if that doesn't appear, if that sense of, I do know I am, because really it's the sense of I am that I'm speaking of, really. That sense just doesn't appear. I don't know. And I can remember what it feels like. It feels like being trapped inside.
Mm.
It feels imprisonment. It feels painfully separate. It feels tiny. It feels tiny and incredibly vulnerable in this vast universe of everything else. So I haven't forgotten what it feels like. And what it feels like without that, that's what we find very difficult to speak about. So what is it like without that sense? That's what you try and convey. And we have our pathetic attempts to try and convey how it might feel without that concrete sense of being inside. Because there's no sense of being inside at all. It's outrageously empty. It's terribly, and I mean, it is quite a terrible emptiness. It's what I was afraid of. I was always afraid of the dark, of the abyss, of the void, and it was horrific. And the wonder is that there's nothing to fear. I still can't quite get over that the darkness, the not knowing. If you think of darkness and not knowing, I mean, they go hand in hand. that it was terrifying to not know. And yet, of course, not knowing is completely benign. It's utterly neutral. There's nothing in the dark. There aren't any monsters. And I was terrified of not knowing and filled that void with all kinds of monsters.
It's like there's nobody left to fear.
Yeah, yeah. I was always afraid of, I mean, there was a reason I was always so nice to everyone. I was terrified of them.
Mm. Oh.
But there aren't any others. No, without self, there aren't any others.
No.
No.
Even emptiness puts a label on it that gives us a handle.
Yeah, I quite like the dark.
Uh, even that.
But even that, yeah, of course.
Thanks, Tim.
Every word, yeah. And of course, the light. I mean, it is one of the biggest dualities for human beings is the light and the dark, and we make the darkness evil. I mean, that's virtually every culture has done this. So what we can't see, we make dangerous and frightening. What we can't know, the dark, death. And we make the light goodness and righteousness and everything desirable. When, of course, there is no darkness separate from light. Light and dark are not two. There is the appearance of darkness and light. One of the, I mean, there isn't much to shout about with this, but not being afraid of the dark, I would say, that's the most liberating of all. I was always terrified of the dark, and the darkness was not knowing. The darkness was where I couldn't see. I need to see. If I can't see, there's terrors everywhere. I have to see. Let me see. Let me into the light so that I can see. It's, you know, in every myth, in every culture, there's stories of like that, where the darkness is seen to be the enemy. And of course, to self, it is the enemy. And yet the wonder is that the darkness isn't a threat.
The idea that darkness exists only as an idea, that our world is, as personas, our ideas composed only of ideas. It doesn't leave us. Without that, there's a deeply integrated sense of not even no self.
No.
Not even.
Oh, there's not even no self. No, definitely not.
Something would have to exist to not exist.
The only reason we're talking about no self is because everyone, you know, virtually every human being is convinced of themselves. No, there's no, I mean, it really is it's very obvious. There's no more a no self than there is a self. Yeah, no, not true.
It's the closed loop
Yeah.
of belief. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Michael.
Natalie has a hand up.
Natalie. Hi, Natalie.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. Hi. Oh my gosh. You know, that emptiness of everything that appears, you know, just that emptiness of all of it, just so, just goes, comes, goes, seems like that. But there was like this feeling of, I want to see, I know everything's empty, but I want to see that empty is empty. Like, you know, and it's like, what the frick is going on?
Well, isn't that funny? Yeah, I'm not
I
content.
know.
I'm not content with this emptiness. I need to see the real emptiness, you
The
know?
real emptiness.
Yeah.
But somehow, I don't even know, that emptiness, that sense of self, I don't know what it is, because it almost seems like it's just like an afterthought that latches on or something, that has this protesting or something, you know. There's as it is and the protesting, but the protesting is also as it is,
Yeah.
you know. It's just that protestation does nothing. It irritates, it annoys. I don't know what else to say.
Well, the thing, I mean, I don't know about you, but yeah, sure, I wouldn't be at all surprised if virtually everyone who gets a sense of the emptiness of everything, if there is an obviousness and, oh shit, everything's empty, then there will be a voice that says, do you think it's the real emptiness?
Right. Yeah.
Do you think it's the emptiness?
And then,
is it the emptiness of which the great ones spoke? Probably not,
right.
no, because they're emptiness.
Yeah.
You know, you can compare emptiness just like you can compare any
Sure.
other.
Yes, yes. And listen, okay, so there's no self. That's silliness. I mean, come on, there's no self, no self, whatever. But then that emptiness is, let's explore that. Let's go into that. What does this mean? What does that mean? This emptiness means something. I've got to figure it out. You know, oh, let me check my hair real quick. You know, that kind of thing. It's almost just like the silliness of it all. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
But the thing about emptiness, of course, emptiness doesn't mean anything.
No.
I mean, it does.
Nothing.
It means whatever it means to each being who hears the word. They will have their own unique. I mean, how wonderful is it that every word, we use words to communicate. It's all we've got. And yet when I use a word, every one of you who is listening and hears that word will have your own unique, totally unique interpretation of that word. This whole notion that we use a word and it means, you know, it's universally heard as the same meaning, it's complete nonsense. Every human being has its own unique experience of words and what they will conjure up. Yeah. That's liberating as well. If you don't expect anyone to understand.
Not really.
Because you can't expect then, because then there's there's a freedom of the expectation that everyone will understand what you're talking about. No, it's really clear no one will understand you.
Exactly. Yep.
No one's ever understood you. No one will ever understand you. I mean, how that can be dreadful.
How could they?
It can be quite, you know, awful when you've always wanted to be understood. Especially if you've still got that little child who was desperately trying to be heard and understood and wanted to be listened to by the ones, you know, the giants, and wanted to be acknowledged. But no one can hear you. I mean, there's freedom in that. So we're
very much so. So now we're at the back to the beginning, where it's even more confusing than ever. There's no ground to stand on. There's no, honestly, there isn't even a knowing of what is going on. No. I mean, there doesn't need to be, very obviously, because it's, you know, it's all just doing it on its own.
Yeah.
There was that feeling of, ooh, I need to know what's going on. I don't even know what the hell's going on. No. I mean, like, as far as this goes, I couldn't even begin. Like, I would, inside, outside, doesn't even make sense at this point. Like, you know.
But I mean, you can say
but it doesn't need to.
But the thing is, no, it doesn't need to. No, because
No,
the
no.
whole. No, because it was always illusory. Knowing what's going on is never it's never the truth.
Right.
No? But it can be
It was,
liberating and freeing that no one knows. I mean, the only confusion is it can only be painful and confusing if you think that there are some human beings who, if you've still got if that's still hanging around, that there are still some people who do know, then you're going to still want to ask them.
Yeah.
While
or just ask.
while that's still hanging around, of course, it will feel confusing because you're still in the story of, I could get where my master is.
Right.
I could.
This confusing is more like, I was just going to say, this confusing is more like, who the hell knows? Who cares? I mean,
No.
it's just, it, you know, it's just not knowable. That's the kind of confusing that I'm talking about. Just that it's unknowable, like that anyone could give an answer, or, you know, all these questions. I mean, they're just questions. They aren't going to solve anything.
No.
I mean, what would they solve?
Well, there's nothing.
There isn't a way to live by anything that we talk about here, you know? And I feel like maybe that was something that was thought, you know, those thoughts just come up. Oh, well, of course the self wants something to have a landing point. So there's a feeling of security.
Absolutely.
You know.
And there's no security in this at all, no.
No. Right. That's what I was getting at. There isn't any, no. But you know, that caring for others, though, even though we don't understand each other, and you know, that's a really just so beautiful. I mean, I can't say.
Oh no, I mean, how can you convey that? How can you convey that without the one who thought it was doing all the caring and the loving? There's much more love and caring. That doesn't make any sense, but there it is. You know, when I say it doesn't make sense, try explaining that to anyone.
Don't do it. That's my advice. Don't do it. No, it sometimes doesn't go over well. So
it doesn't go down very well at all.
No. Yeah, Tim. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Natalie. No, because this isn't an answer at all. Of course, confusion can occur just as I'm talking. When I say the peace that passes all understanding, I'm talking the peace that is in confusion. Why do you think? Why is it that you think you have the right to know? You know, this is the arrogance of self. This is pure arrogance. Others have known. Well, I want to know. I want to know. Tell me. Show me. Well, what if there's nothing to be shown? What if there is no revelation? No awakening, no liberation, no enlightenment, just stories. Just stories. How can there be enlightenment if this is all the light? There can be no more light than there is. No matter how dark it may appear. Dario.
Yeah, there was this one question. So when you go shopping for dinner, for example, and there's no knowing of, or no sense of self, or knowing of who and how I am, like how is there any, how can there be any decision about what to eat?
Oh, that's lovely. So all that seems to happen, Dario, is are you saying you decide what you're going to eat? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't know. I mean, with a sense of self, there's like, I'm the type of guy that would eat this kind of stuff or that kind of
Mhm.
dinner. But if that's not there, like if there's no knowing about how I am.
Oh, it doesn't need I to know hunger.
Yeah.
No. Well, there's no knowing of hunger. There's just hunger. I mean, if
But
you
it's
don't
still
need
preference
to,
then, maybe.
you don't need to go to, you don't need to have a self to go to the fridge when there's hunger and have a look what's in there. And you don't need a self to then, as your hand reaches for what the body would prefer to eat. It's all natural. So the only illusion is that it needs a self to do the choosing. That's all.
Yeah.
So choosing just naturally happens. I mean, dogs choose, they don't have a self. You put 2 bowls of food out for the dog, one of which you know it prefers, it'll just eat the one it prefers. It hasn't chosen that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
So what I mean is there really is no difference. So you're saying, well, how does that happen without a self? Well, all it does is presuppose that when you've got a self, you need a self to do that. Well, all I'm saying is no, there never is it's not that you could lose that self and then you wouldn't be able to choose. And so you wouldn't even recognize the absence of it because it all happens naturally anyway. And then it's claimed after. So you may have noticed this already. Often there's a doing and then afterwards a claiming.
Yeah.
There's the choices. So it's not, so the choosing often comes after the event. I mean, that says everything you want to. If you ever notice that, I mean, it negates the chooser straight away. It's like, well, who the fuck did that? I mean, the most obvious one for me was driving home from work. I would quite often drive home, and I would get home, and I would just. And the first realization I had of any driving or awareness of any driving would be parking outside my house. And there's no recollection of any of the driving at all, completely on auto, you could say, autopilot. And then self would reappear and go, how the fuck did I get here? I mean, I'm sure everyone's had that.
Yeah, with driving.
Well, kind of. Well, what I'm suggesting is it's like that all the time. That's how it naturally is. But self likes to feel it's in control. So it's always chirping in and saying, look, I'm here. I'm doing this shit. I'm controlling. I'm managing this show. And all I'm suggesting is that's all illusory, and there isn't anyone managing anything. If you stop turning up, Dario, you wouldn't even notice.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, you have to be there to notice. So in order to notice the absence of yourself, you would have to be present, wouldn't you? In your own absence.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. So the illusion of presence is what we're talking about.
Yes.
There is no one to be present or absent.
That's what you say.
That's what I say.
Thanks.
And what was your, and so how would I choose when I go to the shops? Well, the thing is,
I don't know. This evening,
this human being is very clear about the food that it likes, and
yeah, okay.
yeah, and it just goes straight for. And because I'm not very health conscious, I literally just buy what I like.
Yeah.
And I will say, I would recommend it to all selves or no selves, either way. Just go shopping and pick up everything you like. God, it's quick and easy. If you take out all the shoulds out of food shopping, what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat, if you don't have any, if you take that out, then, and you only buy what you fancy, I mean, you're just walking around picking up random shit from, and it takes 5 minutes to do all your shopping. But then you might look and go, oh no, I shouldn't have that, I shouldn't have. And then you have to take it all back and start again. But if you just go with what you really like and what you would want to eat, for pleasure, I mean, shopping like a dog. You know, if you took a dog to the shops, the dog would just go straight for the dog food. Well, and the steak and the sausages, and he would just, you know, just go crazy.
Great advice. Thank you.
And then you'll get home and you'll go, and there'll be such joy. You know, when you go shopping, you've got a lot of stuff you should eat, but you don't want to eat. But this way, you empty the shopping, and it's like everything comes out of the bag. You go, oh, shall I have that first? Oh, I don't know. Oh, no, I'll have this. No, I'll have this first. And then rather than cook dinner, you just get a big tub of ice cream and put the TV on and eat that.
Word.
Giovanni has his hand up.
Giovanni. Hi there.
Hi there. No, I just want to say that even if there is indecision, even if you go to the shopping and can't decide what to buy, that is also a functioning of the psychosomatic machine.
Absolutely.
It has nothing to do with myself, I mean,
No,
with a me.
no.
Even in decisions or hard things to decide, doesn't make any difference
No,
than deciding quickly. It's the
Not at all.
same mechanism, right?
well, yeah, but I will, I mean, but self is good at that, you know, with all the shoulds.
Oh yeah, self is good at that. Yeah,
Self, that's one of the things we can give to self, as it is an expert in what it should and shouldn't do.
Yeah.
So what all I'm suggesting is that, that could equally, and of course there's no less, it's not self, there isn't a self, but while there is a sense of I should be doing the right thing, it's the sense of there is a right thing to do, really.
yeah. But when you go shopping, which is not some kind of deep, fundamental existential analysis, you are just going to shop. The human machine can have a hard time deciding if he wants to eat, drink milk or orange juice. It is waiting. Should I,
Yeah.
it's,
Oh yeah, that's quite,
Yeah.
I would say that's quite natural, yeah.
yeah, it's some people, some machines have a hard time deciding, but not necessarily because there is a me.
No. Well, I mean, absolutely not because there's a me, because there isn't a me, but it will seem like that because it's bad to talk about me as though there is a me that's universal. That's not true at all, because some me's are very hard on themselves and make it tough to make decisions. But I will say, and the character's the character, Giovanni. So a character that's indecisive and does take a long time to make decisions.
The character, yeah,
It's just the character, yeah.
yeah. That's the right word, yeah. The character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Character, and really, I mean, character is what I'd call the natural state, the natural way of being. So character, this we're not talking about a change in character at all. Because there is this sense of, okay, without me, I would be a different character. I mean, I think some people have that as a fantasy, but of course the character, you could say it's liberation for the character to be more itself. But that's just another story.
Right, right. No conclusion. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Oh, thanks, Giovanni. But you're right, I've got a friend who I'm not mentioning names. Better not. But when I go to a restaurant, it's just, it's because I can choose in 10 seconds. I kind of know before I've opened I pretty much know what I like. And I'm going to have what I like. So it's not, I don't have to read the menu. Fuck it, not at all. I know what I like. I might just not even read it and just ask the waiter, do you have what I like? But I've got a friend who he will have to read every fucking word on that menu. And then he will have to ask the waiter some questions about some of the dishes. I want to kill him because I'm in a restaurant because I'm hungry. And anything that delays is annoying. Every time I'm like, oh, fuck. Please. Just, and it's just like, there we go. That's his character. And I want to kill him.
Brandon has his hand up.
Brendan, hello, mate.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
I got up this morning and I like words. We were talking about words earlier. I like words, and I'm an absolute master at one word. It's the only word that I'm a master at, and that is consequence.
Oh, yeah.
Everything I do has consequence. I looked up where it comes from, consecutor. Everything I decide follows.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm just sharing that. It just occurred to me this morning.
Well, that's
To be a master at something.
yeah. There are. See, self loves the idea of consequences because that's where control is in consequence. You know, the sense of being in control. If I know this action will lead to that consequence.
Or to the consequence I don't want.
Yeah, but so the belief in consequence is essential for me because that's essential for feeling that I'm in some kind of control of life, of my life. I mean, but you will have already learned, Brendan, that no matter how good you are at it, it doesn't matter how good you are at it. And you're probably fucking good. You've already bigged yourself up and said you are. What I'm suggesting, is no matter how good you are, you cannot know the consequence. You can't even know the action itself. If you can't know the doing itself, how on earth are you going to know the consequence of that doing? So that's the freedom we're talking about. We're talking about just a total anarchic, unknowable, wild freedom that whatever ideas we have about action and consequential action from that action, cause and effect. So the whole notion of cause and effect is annihilated by this. So there are still stories of cause and effect and probability. but that's all they are. They're just stories of that. And just because you've done something 1,000 times in your story and that action led to that consequence does not mean that it will. We all know this. Everyone knows it. But self has to be kind of in denial of this unknowableness. Otherwise, it feels itself falling into not knowing. That's what we're speaking of. So in an absolute sense, Brendan, there are no consequences. Absolutely not.
I just think there are.
Relatively, we have to think, because of course there aren't any consequences if we don't think about it. If there's no thought, there's no consequence. Consequence is only a consequence of thought. So it can't not be, because this is just always appearing as it is. And then there's the story of it. This is a consequence of that. And then this can be, and we can have the story of, okay, this will lead to that as a consequence of this. So that leads to this, and this leads to that. It's not true. But in communicating a story, of course, it is true. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to tell a story.
Thanks, Tim.
But it's only true as a story. It has no absolute truth at all. It's what I talked about. I mean, consequence and becoming is the same thing, really. They're the same kind of story. That one thing leads to another. Well, one thing doesn't lead to another. I know. How ridiculous. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks.
I guess that, thinking on what Brendan was saying as well, it also creates that idea of that I could have done everything different in my life, and I'm responsible for everything, and every choice I made could have led somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Who doesn't like the movie Sliding Doors? Do you remember it?
Yeah,
It's good.
yeah. But of course, mostly that comes with regret, doesn't it? Of all the things that you could have, should have done better,
Yeah,
and
but
the things you
equally,
shouldn't have said, and the things you should have.
But equally, it can be serendipity. It can be yeah, it can be the other way. You can self likes it either way. It can berate itself for poor choices and poor, if onlys, but
and
also
congratulate itself.
And congratulate yourself. I made such a great decision there.
Yeah. Or then there's that story, isn't there? Yeah, mostly in life I make pretty good decisions. Yeah. Or the other one is I always make terrible decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regrets, I have a few, but then again, at least I did it my way. Yeah, self loves that. Well, lovely to see you all. Thanks very much for coming. Pleasure to be with you. Very nice.
Thank you for all.
Oh, thanks, Giovanni. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. Lovely
Thanks,
to see you. Next
Thank
week.
you, Tim.
Oh, you're welcome. Lovely to see you, Tej. Next week, I think it'll be 8 p.m. It'll just be an hour later, I think, next Thursday. But I'll put it all on my website, but I think it will be 8 p.m. But pleasure to see you all. Lovely.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Rocky. I didn't see you. Lovely to see you.